Interesting. All right, I think we'll get started in a minute or two as people are making their way in and taking their seats. Are we all set on the technology side? Good to go? Okay, perfect. All right, in that case, as a silence has fallen over the room, maybe we can go ahead and get started. So welcome to those of you who are here with us in person in Cairo, to our speakers and presenters who are with us virtually, and to those who are joining us on the live stream online. I am Allison Fahey. I'm the Executive Director of the Abdulatif Jamil Poverty Action Lab, or MENA Regional Office, based at the American University in Cairo's School of Business. And I'm very pleased to be with you all this afternoon for our conversation today towards an evidence-informed development agenda for Egypt, fostering government research partnerships. This is a partnership between JPAL MENA at AUC and UNICEF Egypt, with support from Allianz, for which we are quite grateful. I'll give you a couple of quick housekeeping notes as we get started. First, we very much appreciate everyone keeping masks on while in the room. You're free to remove it if you're going to speak. And also, when it comes to the open Q&A, because we have both live interpretation and participants who are joining us virtually, please make sure that you are holding a microphone before you go ahead to speak. So I'll give you a brief introduction to JPAL. JPAL's mission is to reduce poverty by ensuring that policy is informed by rigorous evidence and research is translated into action. And we do that in three main ways. At the heart of this work is conducting research, specifically conducting randomized controlled trials led by our network of affiliated professors. We then conduct policy outreach activities focused on sharing lessons learned from that research and incorporating those insights into policy decisions. And finally, we focus on capacity building to support government partners, NGOs, and donor agencies to better commission, use, and participate in generating rigorous research. JPAL is based on a network of more than 250 affiliated professors. These are some of the world's leading development economists who have a diversity of interests, but what they all share is the use of randomized controlled trials as a tool to generate evidence in what works and what doesn't in the fight against poverty. And they're based at more than 50 universities around the world. You'll hear from one of them today. 3 of our affiliated professors won the Nobel Prize in Economics in 2019 for the way that this research has dramatically improved our ability to fight poverty in practice. And so what does this really look like? First, JPAL is an organization that is locally grounded. We have a network of 7 regional offices. Our MENA office is here at AUC, and hundreds of local partnerships in Egypt and in many other countries. This is complemented with global knowledge. So around the world, the researchers in our network have conducted more than 1,000 rigorous impact evaluations focused on a range of topics in development, from climate change to social protection, from education to health, from gender and women's empowerment to labor markets, among other topics. But conducting the research alone is not the most important part. The question is, what happens with it? How does it get used in decision making? And one way of looking at that kind of impact is that more than 540 million people around the world have been reached by the scale up of programs originally evaluated by JPAL affiliated professors and then scaled up by governments or NGOs to reach many more people. So to recap a little bit, there are sort of two simple ways to think about how you and your organization might work with JPAL. First, we could work with you to actually generate evidence about what works. And this is the research component of our work. We have ongoing impact evaluations with partners who are in the room, with the Ministry of Social Solidarity, joining us virtually, with Ms. MENA, with the Sawiris Foundation, with many other partners. But second, we have many insights already about what works and what doesn't. And what we want to do is share what we know and use those lessons to help inform and help shape policy decisions. And that is what really motivates the Global Evidence for Egypt seminar series, which we've been running together with UNICEF for the last couple of years, and which has reached hundreds of people through both virtual and in-person sessions. So this collaboration between JPAL and UNICEF fosters dialogue between representatives of the Egyptian government who sort of frame what Egypt's development priorities are, and then a conversation with a leading JPAL affiliated professor who shares relevant insights from our global evidence base that might help to address some of those policy priorities. We've completed 2 years of this partnership and we're looking ahead to another couple of years together with UNICEF. And so that's what brings us to why we're here today, both in person and virtually. So we have two kind of ambitious goals, and I'll lay them out for you so that the direction of the agenda makes sense for everyone. So first, we'll hold a keynote and a panel discussion that will look similar, but it will kind of go beyond the seminars that we've hosted together in the past. The keynote by JPAL affiliate Rima Hanna will share global evidence on questions related to social solidarity. She'll talk about how evidence-informed policy has scaled to reach millions of people around the world, and about the power of government and researcher partnerships to ultimately improve lives and improve well-being. So we'll spend our first hour focused on many of those things with this great panel that we have assembled today. In the second hour, we really want to draw all of the rest of you in, and it's why we're here in a proper roundtable format. We want to have you help us to set the agenda for the next couple of years of global evidence seminars. So we'll broaden the conversation, not only from talking about social solidarity priorities, but also to talk about health, to talk about employment, gender, youth empowerment, the various areas of focus that each of you here in the room spend your time on every day. So with that, I will give you an overview of the agenda. We'll begin with some introductory remarks from our panelists here and virtually. We'll then open to our keynote with Dr. Rima Hanna and come back to a panel discussion with the three who will give opening remarks. Then we'll open the floor for all of you for both Q&A with the panelists and then for broadening to hear the perspectives of your organization. So I'll guide us through that as a moderator for the rest of the afternoon. So with that, I'm very pleased to introduce first Jeremy Hopkins, who is the UNICEF representative in Egypt. Jeremy holds an MSc in Development Studies from SOAS. He began his career with the WFP in Somalia and then shifted to working with UNICEF in Somalia, Mozambique, the Central African Republic, Yemen, back to Somalia, and for the last couple of years, he's been the UNICEF representative here. So Jeremy, I'll hand it over to you for your opening remarks.
It's a great pleasure to be here. Thank you for the clear introduction that's setting us on track for a good discussion today. I'm not sure if Dr. Naveen is with us, but I'm very pleased that she will be or has joined us. As well as Dr. Rima, yourself, Alison, Dr. Samir, and I can't see my notes, so please put the lights on, including the one here at the back. So, you know, I think you gave us a good introduction, so we know why we're here, but I wanted to just to kind of thank particularly Dr. Naveen for the energy that she's put into, will put into today, no doubt, but has put into the seminar series over the last period. And we've looked to her for leadership on in policy and in this discussion around social protection, child protection, early childhood development, behavior change, among many other issues of relevance for social development, and key, of course, to the sort of principles that you outlined, Alison, at the beginning. I'd also like to thank you both, JPAL and American University of Cairo. I think for UNICEF anyway, is a very exciting and innovative partnership. And of course, just in case you didn't realize, but Allianz has been supporting us. So I want to pay tribute to them as well for this. So this is our first physical meeting. I've attended a couple, I think, online, but it's really great that we're here, all of us together in the room, most of us, I should say. But I think it's also a reminder that times are constantly changing, and that calls for changes in policy, changes in strategy, and therefore changes in what evidence we need to inform those policies and strategies. And I think I find the approach in Egypt very mature in terms of the constant requirement to have an evidence base for policy decisions, which makes this format all the more important in the new normal where we find ourselves. And of course, the direction that we lay out today will be, I think, crucial for, we hope, for future investments for children, for social development. The global evidence series that you mentioned, Alison, has been going for 2 years. We hope it will continue for many more years, and it's been a great opportunity to foster discussion between policymakers, development practitioners, researchers, academics. We are confident that it really has made a very concrete and impactful contribution to policy priorities in Egypt, and we're very pleased to be part of this discussion. We've had the pleasure in the past of having with us in the seminar series the Minister of Social Solidarity, the National Council for Women, the Minister of Youth and Sports, the Ministry of Manpower, and of course we have looked at issues around social and gender norms, social assistance, unemployment, and many other technical areas that relate to poverty and poverty reduction. So I'm looking forward to the discussion. I'm really excited to see what path we lay out for us today. I think there's many more experts in the room than myself, so I'm going to mostly listen. But I'm really that we do emerge from today with such a path, at least in general terms, which will contribute to the well-being of children and, of course, the achievement of Egypt's 2030 vision. And it's a pleasure to be here. Thank you.
Thanks, Jeremy. And next, I have the pleasure of introducing Dr. Samer Atalla, the Associate Dean for Graduate Studies and Research at the AUC School of Business. He has been an associate professor of economics at AUC since 2011. His research focuses on political economy and development economics, and he's widely published in those areas. He's also a research fellow at the ERF, a member of the Canadian Economics Association and the Middle East Economics Association. So Dr. Samer, over to you.
Thank you, Alison. Masal al-Khair. Your Excellency, Minister Al-Kubatch, fellow panelists, Professor Hannah, Mr. Hopkins, and Ms. Fahi, colleagues from government, NGOs, and international organizations, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to this very exciting and important event that really lays the foundation of a very important collaboration among academics, policymakers, and practitioners. This is a very exciting moment for me personally and for the American University in Cairo and its School of Business. Last year, AUC embarked on its second century of operation in Egypt. It continues to be the leading academic institution in the production and dissemination of knowledge on issues related and pertaining to Egypt and the region overall. We continue to be Egypt's gateway of knowledge about Egypt and the region, and it's also the door for global practitioners to know about this region. So this collaboration really falls into our mission as an institution overall, and it also falls in our ability to serve the Egyptian community at large. In my view, we were able to do so due to a lot of reasons, but two of them I would like to really share my thoughts on them today. One of them is our ability to conduct and to foster successful partnership with global partners. Hence, an event like today is one of these examples, but also our commitment and continuous engagement with the government of Egypt. In my views, these are the two of the main ingredients why EUC continues to be where it is now and continues to fulfill its mission. And again, this is just an example of what we do, and seeing here colleagues from universities, colleagues from international organizations, and colleagues from outside of Egypt is really a fulfilling example of this. So, and today also is a very important point in the journey of JPAL MENA. We have worked tirelessly during the past 2 years to grow what was a small initiative with a couple of randomized controlled trials running in Egypt to a full-fledged research center that produces research and guides policy using an innovative research methodology and randomized controlled trials. I'm very happy to see that a lot of the team here around the table, I counted them outside. I think when we started the initiative, we were smaller than the number of policy team outside. So this is really an indication of the prospect and the potential that we can help and serve the Egyptian community at large and the region. So this is really a great potential. It will help us produce research on really important challenges that Egypt is facing, and to guide our partners in the government and international organizations and NGOs to do that. But also we're bringing also partners such as UNICEF and Alliance to support this and to guide this, which is really a very good puzzle that puts the pieces together, an academic institution, an international partner, an international organization. It is also another example of a very long list of our engagement with the Egyptian government. AUC have been serving the community with its continuous commitment to serving the Egyptian government and its priorities. This is one of many, many, many examples where we have supported the government of Egypt through its different ministries, Ministry of Education, Ministry of Social Solidarity, Ministry of Higher Education, just to list one example of how important the contribution of AUC to the policy agenda of Egypt. We are running a major program to support the most talented Egyptian students to get enrolled at AUC and other universities. And this is really a part and parcel of our mission. I don't want to take a lot of time, but I would like to thank Her Excellency Minister Al-Qabbaj for her belief in evidence-based policy making and for being here today to set what we can help and support for the government of Egypt. I would like to thank UNICEF and Alliance for their support and engagement with us. And I would also like to thank Rima for waking up early, but also most importantly for her scholarly contribution and sharing it with us today. And it's really a privilege to be here and listen to Rima. I would like to thank her sincerely. But most importantly, I would like to thank my colleagues at the JPAL MENA at AUC for their diligent work and persistent. Thank you so much. I'm really looking forward to a very constructive dialogue. I want to finish with a note. I've seen today some of my former students, and today it's a very interesting, personally for me, point of indication. I always challenge my students and told them that Egypt problems are not Egyptian. And they're part and parcel of the global challenges in the world. And today's event is really a vindication of my view that they always challenge this, and they always said, no, it's the Egyptian context that generates and exacerbates these problems. But I think here today we are sharing with international scholars their view on global problems, but not only that, but we'll also be able to share and learn global solutions for these problems. So thank you so much.
Great, thank you, Samer. And now I'm pleased to introduce Dr. Naveen Kabash, the Minister of Social Solidarity. She, of course, has more than 25 years of experience in the field of international cooperation, strategic management, and institutional development. Following graduate studies in international political economy and international relations, she worked both as a researcher, worked in UN agencies, and then since 2015 has moved to the Ministry of Social Solidarity, serving first as a senior assistant to the minister, and then of course becoming the minister. So Your Excellency, we're very pleased to have you with us, and we'll turn it over to you now for opening remarks.
Thank you very much, Alison. It's a great pleasure to be with you today, and thank you for this invitation in such an important meeting and very close to my heart. And greetings to Mr. Osama Gohari and Mr. Jeremy Hopkins, Dr. Samer and Mr. Ayman Hijazi. This is really one of the most the closest issues to my heart, which is evidence-based policies and the issue of bridging the gap between policymakers and researchers. And it's been a long debate that's been going on, and it actually harmonizes with the human rights-based approach and the issue of the availability, accessibility to data, and to updating this data, having them disaggregated to highlight the disaggregation and the equity-based analysis. I think, do you hear me? Hello?
Yes, we can hear you.
So the issue of the human rights-based approach and also the results-based approach, I think it's now the time is right in order to count on results and not on processes, or rather than on numbers. I think it's also has a strong evidence base to do with the governance, process, availability, transparency of data. It gives me a great pleasure to participate in such an event, and thank you very much, JPAL. I think the process is going on right track, especially with the electronic networking and with the automation basis and digital transformation, because we do believe that research, monitoring data, and so on cannot be done without such automation revolution that would happen. And I think now the administrative reform that the government is the Egyptian government is witnessing is part of this. It has many challenges that we will tackle in terms of our course of discussion regarding the institutional capacity and the civil servants capacity, and also the issues of the changeable world in terms of the interchanging data and the importance of real-time data. I think bridging the gap, it's not only between policymakers and between researchers, but even the younger generations that are very well educated, and in terms in Egyptian universities or in international universities, we need to bridge the gap also between us and them. The Ministry of Social Solidarity incorporates evidence into policy making during different stages, starting from setting up the agenda from the formulation to implementation. It's not a matter only of research, but of data monitoring systems, real-time monitoring, surveys, studies, and evaluation, with special emphasis on impact evaluation to measure exactly the real changes that happens in the lives of people. This would definitely entail tools, approaches, and processes that might not be quite ready or might not be well known and agreed upon amongst the different partners. And this is why these meetings are very important for us, the development of partnerships, such partnerships with UNICEF. And I know that being ex-UNICEF, I know how much UNICEF is considerate about evidence-based policy and about bridging the gap and the quality and the timeliness of the evidence-based data. Maybe the ministry plays a pivotal role in building, protecting, and utilizing human capital through social safety nets, through also reducing poverty, protecting and advocating and promoting the rights of people with disabilities, breaking the intergeneration poverty and promoting human capital accumulation, So as we strongly believe in evidence-based programming and impact evaluation, we already did an impact evaluation conducted by International Food Policy Research Institute on the biggest condition cash transfer program in Egypt, which is the Kefal and Karama, and it actually guided us during the following period on how we go. So the rights of the persons, in order to know exactly where the resources are being invested and how much rights are being saved and how many lives are being saved, and the resources and the equitable distribution of resources is very much welcomed and encouraged. We are aware of the importance of economic inclusion to graduate out of poverty and to work on economic issues as well, which would never be possible without doing the research issues, which should be ongoing. We in the ministry are supervising the National Center for Social and Criminological Studies, where we are setting the act to do an observatory in order to have social observatory on the different dimensions and the different causal analysis. The issue is that frequently, maybe we study symptoms, but the issue of having the causal analysis and the critical thinking is still missing in the research arena. And I think we wait up till the end, till we do the piece of research, the issue of the participation of the direct stakeholders, whether they are children or even the poor people. I remember even while doing the evidence-based and the impact evaluation on the Kefal and Karama, we did not include the people with disabilities with us in the research, which was a big gap. And I commented on this and the rights of people who are participating in this in order to be included, in order to be participating. And we learned this in UNICEF, participation of children in research. So this issue is very important. I think also within the mess of how doing, I won't say mess, but I mean too many talks about the social media judgments and so on, while not relying on evidence, real evidence that is scientifically rigorous, is an issue that has to be tackled seriously amongst us, people working on the development in the development sector. The SDGs and the indicators should be, yes, we monitor them and so on, but I think we need more to have them more rigorous and more documented and more shared with us in terms of electronic networking and in terms of revision of data. So I think the ministry is working on this in a manner that is more mature than, much better than before. And even the National Center for Social and Criminological Studies, which is the research arm of MOS, is launching Social Observatory to measure changes in knowledge, attitudes, and practices through real-time data in Hayat Karima. I think there is there are big opportunities to collaborate together in order to have real-time data on around 4 million households with the real-time data, which means that we do have pieces of data that we can rely on. Big data analysis is an issue in the Kefal and Karama. We have around 35 million individuals, the data, the disaggregated data. So the analysis of the big data is also very important, because as we know that it's been a while, the census is done every 10 years, and I think hikes is done every 2 to 3 years, and the results are mostly sometimes late. And also the DHS is not there for the moment. So what do we need to have is to develop something that is a mechanism of data analysis and data production and data in terms of evidence-based data, in order to guide us where we go, especially with the interchangeable time that we're living with Hayat Karima. There are going to be changes every day. Even the poverty scores will change, because Hayat Karima is an ongoing process. So we cannot really rely on the poverty map that we have. We have issues that we need to tackle together in terms of sampling process, in terms of the rigorousness of data, in terms of cross-checking, especially while having administrative control authority, having the unified national registry that we collaborate with. Nonetheless, electronic data is not only enough. We need to have some sort of field evidence. So I think collaboration between the electronic and the field and the cross-checking, including communities with us in cross-checking the data, is very important. I think there are lots of issues that need to be tackled together. It's very interesting to participate and to collaborate such an important issue that is for us, for all of us. I won't say eye-opener, but it means a lot to look into what we're doing with transparency, rigorousness, with a human rights-based approach in order to make things go better and to reach better impact. Finally, it starts with data. It starts with setting the agenda, but it ends up with impact analysis. So it's not only research, it's a continuous process of studies that are utilization based, because I also commented on some of the studies that are done and are left out without really being utilized or responding back to a real demand that the government needs. And that's why the close collaboration and coordination is frequently important in order to optimally use the pieces of research that are produced to reach the policymaker as much as to reach to achieve the results expected. Having this said, I think developing a mechanism where we can collaborate together and not having only this session, I would really love and appreciate having a mechanism to work on this together and to draw a strategy. We developed a strategy on statistics and on data analysis and disaggregation. We can share it with you. You can support us doing it because we're working on the most vulnerable. And so nobody, I mean, if we are working really on the most vulnerable and on social issues, then we need your support to look into it together, how we do it, and if we are doing it on the right track or not. And I think there is no better than these valuable partners, whether JPAL and AUC and UNICEF and the IDSC, in order to make this happen. So very happy to be with you during this session. Thank you for participating, and thank you for inviting me, because I think I am really keen to be there, not only this time, but always, till we make things better and till we reach the impact that we're looking forward to do. Thank you very much.
Wonderful. Thank you very much, Dr. Kabesh. And I think a few of your final remarks related to government demand and the real world impact of research is a very nice segue to our keynote for today. So I'm pleased to introduce Dr. Rima Hanna, who is the Jeffrey Chia Professor of Southeast Asia Studies, co-director of Harvard's Evidence for Policy Design Research Center at the Center for International Development. Rima is also the scientific director of JPAL's regional office in Southeast Asia. In addition to that work, she helps to lead some of JPAL's work in Morocco with the Ministry of Labor. She is a research associate at the National Bureau of Economic Research, an affiliate of the Bureau for Research and Economic Analysis of Development, and a faculty affiliate at the Harvard Center for Population and Development Studies. She is particularly interested in understanding how to make government work for the poor in developing countries. So Rima, I'll let you take a sip of your early morning tea, say thank you for joining us before 7 a.m. your time, and turn the floor over to you for your keynote address.
Hello, thank you so much for having me here today. My apologies not to be there in person, but hopefully that will change in the future. So today I'm going to be talking a little bit about using evidence from randomized evaluations to address government priorities, and how I'm mostly going to be talking about some examples from my work in Southeast Asia, particularly in Indonesia. But really the idea is to think about how some of these examples of how the research was actually used in policy. And as we start to think more about this research to policy link in Egypt, how we can build these kind of links here as well. And so I think, next slide. So there's many priorities in Egypt today that are centered around economics, and there's issues of youth unemployment and water scarcity and climate change and migration and gender. Many of these same challenges that many countries around the world are themselves are struggling with. And so, today I'm going to be mostly focusing around questions of social protection, which is the area of interest that I work in. But a lot of the ideas and tools and thinking around a lot of what I'm going to be talking about today, we can also think about how do we apply them to these other sectors as well that are extremely important, and how we could use evidence in this across the different topics as well. And so next slide. With lots of these challenges today, the question is thinking about how do we use evidence to improve our policy decision making, with the end goal of improving the lives of the citizens that we have a shared responsibility to. And so next slide. There's been a huge growth in impact evaluation over the last 20 years. This is interesting. It comes from both this revolution in terms of the electronic data collection. It's making it a lot easier to conduct studies. It comes from a lot of our own understanding of how to conduct a study and what does it mean. And but for many reasons of how this has arisen, it really has mushroomed around many countries around the world. The evaluations, there's two ways we should be thinking about evaluations. First, there's evaluations that are specific to a given context or program or policy, where we're starting a new evaluation. And there we typically think about it as, is there a new policy or program that's very innovative, that we're doing something new that we really need to learn about? Is it that it's something that the context is very different than other contexts where this has been tried before? And so when we often think of something very new, we often think of running an evaluation from scratch and building it into the government program or policy to really learn what works. The other way we could think about evaluation is, there is this body of evidence that has grown from the last 20 years. Many other countries have been doing these evaluations. What have we learned from other contexts? Can we take the knowledge from other settings and think about in which cases it applies or it doesn't apply to our particular context, and use that to help also guide our policy decision making? And so there's these two big ways that evaluation can be used. As I said, it's using what's out there, but also then helping to generate evidence for particularly new or innovative programs. And so, this kind of evidence, is extremely important as we think about how to reach many people, particularly when we are thinking about how to improve the lives of the poor. So I'm going to skip ahead, and so I'm going to go to the next slide. And I think what I'm going to do for most of the talk is talk about a few examples from my work in Indonesia, where we work very closely with the government on the social protection policies and programs that reach millions of poor people across Indonesia, to try to think about how do we improve the functioning of these programs. So next slide. So the first program I'm going to be talking about is the Raskin program. The Raskin was Indonesia's biggest social protection policy program until subsidized health insurance came a couple of years ago. It's about $1.5 billion a year, and it basically provides subsidized or free rice for the poorest families out there. The program, though, while it had been around for many years, and in fact, actually, it's no longer around, and it's been more, as a result of many things, has been morphed into a new program, which I'll talk about later. It has a lot of the poor transparency around the problem, poor transparency around the program. and many problems in service delivery. So the poor households are basically targeted by the government in a unified database, and they're supposed to receive a certain amount of rice per month. And what basically happens is recipients receive just about 30% of the subsidy that they're supposed to receive. And this comes in part because rice goes missing through the system, and we don't exactly know where, but by the time the rice is bought and distributed, a certain fraction goes missing, but also because a lot of households that are not eligible for the program actually receive the rice as well. And so while this is a program that's supposed to be targeted and concentrated towards the poor, it gets used by many. And so the poor receive very little, and so it doesn't actually make that much of a difference for them. And so the question became, how do you ensure that the poor are getting their subsidy? How do you ensure that the program functions as it should? And so some years ago, the National Team for Accelerating Poverty Reduction, known as Santido COP, which is a think tank underneath the Vice President's Office of Indonesia, proposed an ID card system to try to address these issues. And the idea is that the ID cards are supposed to provide transparency. And so that if you are a poor household that's targeted by a program, you have a card. The cards are also very visible. And so the idea is that if you go and you try to obtain the rice without a card, everybody else can see. And so the idea was it was supposed to also generate public knowledge about who is actually eligible for the program, in addition to the personal knowledge that you yourself is eligible. And so but there were a lot of concerns about whether or not this was going to be effective. So first of all, when the team had presented to the vice president, one thing, he said was, well, what if all of these cards just get thrown away and nobody uses them and we spend all this money on cards and then, this is not actually doing anything. There was also real concerns that it could backfire. So suppose you have these local officials who are trying to distribute the rice, and the cards come in and they cause a lot of social discord in the village, either because a lot of rice goes missing before it gets to the village and there's not much he or she could do to improve the program. And so people would be very upset, or because now suddenly I get a card and I get the program and my neighbor doesn't get a card and they don't get the program, and maybe we're of the same income level and it's just that there's some error in the targeting, and so maybe this could cause a lot of social discord, and then a lot of local officials wouldn't want to run the program, and there could be a lot of difficulties in terms of the service delivery. And so they wanted to know whether or not this was going to work and whether or not it would not backfire from a social perspective. And so the next slide. So we worked with the team to design a randomized evaluation. And it was actually, unfortunately, I don't have the time to discuss all of it in detail, although lots of different interesting results. And we tried out not just the cards, but different ways of doing the cards to figure out what is the optimal way, to actually run the program. But the idea is that really that with the cards, eligible households had an increase in their subsidy by about 26%, which is quite a very large impact for a program. And at the same time, it didn't cause this kind of the social backlash that there was a lot of worry about. And so as a result of this, the government scaled up these cards, not just for Rakan program, but other social protection programs to include, for example, like BOSS, which is the scholarship program and other things, but with the idea that by having these cards, we increase the transparency and information across all of the program set. And so the cards were in this investment in this one evaluation really impacted many, many people as social protection cards were expanded to reach about 66 million people across the country. I'm going to go to the next slide. Okay. So as I was talking about, Raskin. It's very interesting, actually. We've been working with the Raskin program. It's the biggest social protection program for many years. And there were a lot of challenges with these in-kind programs. And, we would do things, for example, the ID cards, which increase the subsidy that poor households received. We worked on other evaluations, for example, what happens if you privatize some of the distribution of the rice delivery program. And, all of these programs had, pretty substantial effects on improving the program, but fundamentally, there was still a lot of challenges with Raskin. There's still a lot of leakage, the quality of the service provision is low. And it really is that a lot of poor households were not receiving their full subsidy. And so, the government of Indonesia decided that they would move away from Raskin more recently and move towards a voucher program. So, which is essentially a food stamps program where instead of providing subsidized rice directly, they would move to, households would get, as you see in the picture here, the debit card. And with a debit card, they're able to go to any shop that has a machine that accepts the debit card and buy rice and eggs. And so the government of Indonesia, we worked with them to evaluate this transition. And it was actually a very interesting opportunity, because the government it's not that the entire country switches over at once from in-kind subsidies to the voucher. It takes time to transition to a new program, to make sure people are getting the debit cards, to make sure that there are enough shops that have the machines that accept the cards and so forth. And so they were phasing it in over time. And so we worked with them to randomize the ordering of when certain districts across the country would be receiving the program, the new reform, the new program. And so the evaluation was about, we randomized across 105 districts in Indonesia as they transitioned over, the timing of when they transitioned over, which is about a fifth of the country. And here it was actually very interesting. What happened was that as I talked about before, one of the key challenges in the Raskin program was that you're trying to target resources to the poorest of the poor, but many people who are not actually eligible for the program actually take part in it as well. And so what ends up happening is that the poor get very little. What we're finding here that when you move from the in-kind transfer program to the voucher program, you're actually spending around the same amount of money in the program, maybe even a little less because this is cheaper to run. But what you actually find is that the poor receive 45% more in terms of their subsidy than they would have under the in-kind program. And this is a very, very large effect. So large that you actually see about a 20% reduction in poverty as a result of the increase in subsidy that they receive. And so, this just tells you, this just tells you how powerful a simple evaluation in the background can be in terms of measuring whether or not the program is actually achieving what you would expect, what you would like it to achieve or not. And understand as you're thinking about of how to carry it forth in the future. And again, as I said, it's a very stark example of just how this is using the same amount of resources that you have available to you. Is the same amount of money, but really just what program you choose, what design you choose in terms of the program is going to have really, really large impacts, and the way evaluation can help you choose between them. The next one I would like to talk about is another, as I said, I work mostly in the area of social protection, safety net programs, social insurance. And so the next program I want to talk about is the National Health Insurance Program. So, Indonesia, like many other countries around the world, has been trying to achieve a national rollout of health insurance. Like many countries, they have subsidized health insurance for the poor. For the formal sector, insurance often runs through companies, but there is this challenge which is, the whole middle of the country. It's the informal sector that has to sign up for the insurance and contribute their premiums each month. And so this was a huge problem. The enrollment of the non-core informal workers. It's difficult to say everybody needs to do it, in part because it's difficult to impose mandate, in part because oftentimes it's very difficult to know who the informal core workers are, especially if not everybody's registered. And it's difficult to monitor whether or not people are enrolled and are making their payments, and that's very costly to do. And so there's this challenge in place of, how do we think about including them in the system, but also doing it in a way that's realistic in terms of the policy tools that are available to the government. And so what we did is we worked with them to test out different types of ways to increase, next slide. I'm on the innovation and research slide. To improve the take-up of these programs. And so we looked at particularly 3 types of things. We looked at additional information on health insurance. We looked at registration support, and we looked at subsidies. Again, I wish I had the time to go into in depth, but just to give you the full, unfortunately I don't, but just to give you a little bit of a picture, the information, nothing. The information had no impact. Describing what the health insurance was and how it could be useful, nothing. The registration support was actually very interesting. When it's actually quite difficult to sign up. You have to go to a district office, you have to have all the right paperwork, you get the photographs, there's lots of things involved. And so when we tried to send facilitators out there door to door to help people enroll, many, many more people wanted to enroll for the program. And then what ended up happening is that they got locked out because they would try to enroll online with the help of our facilitators, but the underlying data infrastructure was imperfect in the background. And so they would get locked out of the system. And so they would still have to go and try to enroll at the district office, which was still a challenge. So that was already a policy finding of we really need, if you're going to set up electronic data structures in order to improve access, it's really important to make sure that the underlying data architecture is updated regularly and that households are not going to get locked out as things change. And then the third thing that we did was we worked on different subsidies, and we looked at what happened with half subsidy versus a full subsidy for a year. And the subsidy was very interesting in that, first of all, as you would expect by economics, the subsidies brought in healthier individuals. And that's interesting because this was also very costly for the government because previously only very sick people would enroll, and so they would have very few people enrolled, but very, very high claims in terms of payouts. And so getting in healthier people into the system with the subsidies actually helped lower the cost of providing the insurance. But what's also very interesting is that if you gave somebody insurance, you gave them a year of free insurance. So you give them a subsidy for a year. What we ended up finding is that more people stayed in the insurance the year after that, and more people paid into the system. That it's something about not just telling people insurance is great and this is why insurance is good for you, but really about having people experience having insurance and what it means and understanding it from that experience led to greater uptake and greater payments into the system as a result of this. And so what you found after these subsidies were over, the year after that, was that in the groups that had had the subsidies, but they were no longer there, you had more people enrolled, and it was cheaper to provide the insurance because you had healthier people enrolled in the system as well. And so as a result of this, this is there is a lot of back and forth about the best way to set the premiums. There's often, because it's so costly to provide the insurance, you want to raise, there's often an intuition to raise the price of the insurance to cover the costs of the claims. But actually what the research was showing was that when you lowered the price, you also got more people, healthier people in the system. your claims per person went down, and so it's more cost effective to have a lower price with more people in and healthier people in, and to have the insurance functioning better. And so as a result of this, the government, some of the study, and along with other things, the government decided not to raise the price on this informal poor group with an intent to try to keep more of the informal poor into the system. Okay, and then next slide. And then finally, I want to talk about a fourth study where we've done a lot of work thinking about how do you even identify the poor for social programs. And, this is, as probably many of you in the room know, this is extremely challenging to do in limited information environments where many people are in the informal sector, people in subsistence agriculture. They're not paper records of who's poor. And so what most countries, most developing, most emerging countries around the world do is use some combination of different methodologies, including proxy means test, which is a data-driven approach to identify the poor. Others use a community method, which is trying to gain information from the community who's poor. And then sometimes a hybrid of the two, so a mixture of the two, trying to draw on the strengths of both different types of methodologies. And, again, unfortunately, as I said, I won't have time to go into each one in depth, but what is very interesting is that, the data-driven approach has certain strengths. There's it's very clear what you're doing. There's a, system in place, formulas you could describe. There's a, but at the same time, the word with the data-driven approach is that it is capturing a household's assets. It's not capturing shocks. It's not capturing what is currently happening. If the data is outdated, and so there could be a lot of benefit about having soft information from communities to help have a more updated list. But then with the community method, you worry about elite capture from local leaders. They'll give it to their friends or relatives, or if somebody is it's good for the politics and not necessarily getting it into the hands of the poor. And so we actually tested this in practice working with the government in Indonesia. And what was interesting is that the PMT did slightly better at trying at reaching the poor, but it was a small difference. And in fact, many of the people that the community method put into the program that the PMT missed, and vice versa. I don't think it's necessarily that it wasn't like you looked, there was not a lot of elite capture. I don't think it was about things that were malicious, but rather that in the community method, you weren't necessarily just matching poverty based on the hard metric of consumption or income, but community members were choosing along other dimensions. They were choosing, for example, if you had two people with the same income, but one was a widow, the community were more likely to include them into the program. If there are two households of the same income level, but the head of the household had a lower education, which meant, in the future, maybe it's harder for them to earn money, the community put them in as well. So the community was using other type of information. And so what ended up actually happening was that while they were not actually that different, while the PMT did a little better, they were not actually that different. And the community method also led to higher community satisfaction. Again, with these targeted programs, there's often a lot of worry that there'll be, social discord if people don't think the program is legitimate, if they think that the program is missing a lot of the poor and rich people are getting in, and there's a lot of challenges around running these programs, just in terms of perception. And in fact, the community method led to much more satisfaction with the program. People thought the money was going to the right people in their communities and were much happier with it. And so during the COVID crisis, there is a very big challenge involved was that suddenly COVID crisis hit and many more people needed social assistance what was there before. And those people might have been different than the people on the social registry social registries before because of the nature of the shock. And so the government had been providing social assistance to people on the social registry, and they increased that social assistance both in value, but also went higher up in terms of the social registry to provide assistance. But what they really realized is that they, that was all done based on assets. But what they needed to do is to fill in the blanks of people who are really being affected by COVID right now. But they didn't have information from the data-driven approach because this is a current shock that was missed by the data. So what they ended up doing was the government had a block program to local municipalities where municipalities would get a block of money to use for public goods programs, for community type programs. They allowed the communities to use that for individual targeted transfers for the first time and to use the community method to determine who should receive the transfers as a result of having a COVID shock. This meant that that about 8 million people who were being affected by COVID, who were not necessarily in the social registry, who were missed in the social registry, either because they weren't core before when the data was collected or other reasons, ended up being included under and helped during the COVID crisis. And so, again, this is just, as with all of these examples that I've been giving, it really just shows the power of doing research to understand, what can work, what cannot work. Often, we have ideas about, things. We have ideas about certain things. For example, we might think the community program would lead to a lot of lead capture, but the data, and by doing the evaluation, it can transform the way we're thinking about things and learn what is actually happening on the ground, what actually works, and be able to then have a broader set of policy tools that are actually just much more effective in reaching people in need. So next slide. I want to just transition. I lost track of time. I've probably run out of time, but I want to just transition very briefly to talking about the idea of doing all of this kind of work. It is very key that these partnerships are done with government, because governments are, if you want to do things at scale, governments are covering entire countries, governments have the resources and the power to run these kind of programs. And they're making, governments are making many, many decisions that are really affecting the lives of citizens, and these decision-making processes can be improved and can be better informed by evidence. And so next slide. So, in addition to the work in Indonesia that I've described, I've been working on many years. In the last 2 years, we've been working with the Millennium, the MCI, the Millennium Challenge out in Morocco, to really try to start building a culture of evidence use in Morocco focused around labor markets. And so we've launched the Morocco Employment Lab. And the lab has 3 key components. First is the lab is designed to start building capacity. So it's helping policymakers, helping researchers think about what is evidence-informed policy, how to use it, what tools are available, and really thinking also then when you get the data, when you get the evidence, how do you interpret it? What does it mean? How can you use it in your decision making? And so we do a number of different types of capacity building and evaluation courses, from how do you actually do an evaluation to how do you interpret evidence from an evaluation and use it in the decision making process. The second part of it is policy outreach. And as I talked about, we can learn a lot from the many evaluations that have been done around the world, and to try to bring it in and to try to think about what it means for the particular context you're working in. So what we are have been doing is trying to set up seminars and conferences and just lots of evidence sharing from different countries around the world from the evaluations that have been done, and really thinking through and talking through what is useful for the Moroccan context or not. And then the third component is actually trying to generate new impact evaluations in Morocco. And here it's really by setting up these partnerships of really focusing on what are the right questions that we should be asking as researchers. What are the questions that are important to policymakers as they're thinking through how to design different programs, how to implement different programs, especially as policymakers are thinking about newer and innovative programs, and really need to know the impact of them. And so with these, the lab is really focused around these three components of helping people use evidence and generate evidence, and both from within, from countries around the world, from other contexts, but also building evidence that's specific to Morocco. Next slide. Okay, so I think, as I think this is sort of the end of my talk. But I do think, this is, I'm so heartened to hear the talks this morning about the idea of improving the evidence base in Egypt. I think, Egypt has, a lot to learn from other countries around the world, what's worked, what doesn't work, and how we can think about it for the Egyptian context. But I do think, Egypt has a lot to give to the world as well in terms of developing, new policies and programs, and also conducting impact evaluations of it. That'll both help Egypt think about how to better deliver services to its citizens, but also that other countries can also learn from in terms of designing their own programs. And I probably went over time, so I will stop here. But thank you for having me here today.
Great. Thank you very much, Rima, for those insightful remarks and for sharing so much of that experience. So now I want to be cognizant of time. So now I'm going to turn back to our three panelists, to Dr. Naveen, to Jeremy, and to Samer, to pose to each of you one maybe big question that will give each of you a chance to go in a few different directions, to react to Rima's presentation and to share some further thoughts. And then we'll open up to the rest of the group that we have gathered here for questions, and then to actually go beyond those questions and answers to think about the future of the Global Evidence Seminar Series. So first, Dr. Naveen, I'll turn to you next. We would love to hear any reactions from you to Rima's presentation, especially reflecting on things she talked about related to targeting, to insurance, to vouchers and subsidies. So if you have any reactions that you would like to share in light of the priorities at the ministry. And then beyond that, I'll also offer you a chance to expand a little bit, given the extensive responsibility of the ministry related to poverty alleviation, social protection, and economic empowerment in Egypt. We would also love to hear from you where you think that evidence can be the most helpful to support policymaking in Egypt related to these goals. So over to you to pick up on both of those questions.
Thank you very much, and thanks for the presenter for her wonderful presentation. My main two questions were because during her presentation, she presented the issue of having the impact evaluation, while there were structural questions that might needed to be answered since the source of the program, and this sheds the light on a question of the program design a priori. To what extent do ex-ante evaluation or something like process evaluation at the beginning in order to study before doing the impact, because apparently the program intervened with different components and interventions while studying the impact at a later phase. So to what extent there was a program design, a rigorous program design that rely on real evidence and the sources of data that they relied on, and whether there was a sort of coordination amongst the different stakeholders, whether in the health insurance one or in the risk of Indonesia, and the benefits of and costs of different policy alternatives. I think the dichotomy between the cash, the PNT or the community-based targeting is still there, and it's open up to discussion. Every component or every approach has its own setbacks with its own exclusion and inclusion errors. But still, we need to have a dynamic sort of data, because the community one is still not rigorous enough, especially in terms of the poor economic conditions and the bias of the community members to some members, or rather than others. So at the end of the day, you need something really tangible and scientific to build on. But again, we're set with the challenge of having this data, the need to have them updated. And that's why in Egypt, we developed for each single household a SIM card in order to have their data updated periodically, whether through them directly or through hiring community workers in order to monitor for each household or for each community worker. They're responsible for 200 households, but it needs to be studied in depth. And the other question I'd like to ask her, if they have something that like unified national registry that they can rely on or not in terms of targeting, in terms of cost. We are stuck in Egypt with not only with numbers, but with budgetary issues. So I wonder whether the Ministry of Finance or their government, the government of Indonesia, was cooperative in terms of opening up to evidence and or to availability of resources. I think in Egypt we have a broad area of opportunities that we should optimally use. It's the conditional cash transfer is a big one in Egypt that reaches around 3.8 million households from 9.5 million households who are registered into our systems. We are at stake now where we are revising the structural issues and the redistribution of subsidy among the different public expenditure. We did a review on the public expenditure of subsidy amongst housing, food subsidy, cash transfer, and actually it is an extreme vital moment now to see how much impact is actually achieved onto those who are benefiting from the different subsidy resources, especially when it comes to children, and especially that we're also introducing a new school feeding program. It's getting bigger and bigger. It might be multiplied by 8 times. So it's a historical moment in the Egyptian social protection scheme where we are revising everything. The question is, do we really need at that point impact evaluation about what happened before? And if we do take the decision, do we have the data that we can compare with, or we need other sorts of research in order to shed the light on, in terms of statistical analysis and actuarial studies that might help us to shed the light a bit besides the impact evaluation? Because I do think that although I know and I'm quite aware that impact evaluation is highly important, but what I'm saying is that, is it relevant for the decisions that need to be taken now in terms of redistribution of subsidy and of the optimizing the benefits of subsidy in terms of targeting the poor, whether we need targeting approaches that are really rigorous, built and relying on accurate data and that could be easily documented and communicated and updated, or do we really need impact evaluation, or we can do both? I think in order to break this, because it's not only a matter of subsidy, it's economic empowerment. So it's a whole set of social protection, revisualizing social protection in Egypt. Because the debate on food subsidy is a long one, which was, lots of issues came that it was wasting lots of resources, especially going to the rich, which could be even tackled in terms of data analysis and disaggregation. So I think, yes, we need an independent impact evaluation to be done, but not only. I think we need it's an amalgam of studies and of research in order to see where we are, and especially with the poorest 20% of the population, and getting aware of the graduation of poverty. The question is, those who were supported for 6 years, are they, I won't say away of poverty, but did they move on the poverty level up or not? So within the introduction of a new economic empowerment program, this is, we really need to have impact evaluation for the conditional cash transfer program. To cut it short and to wrap up, I think we need to have both impact evaluation for those who were supported by cash transfer before, in order to see what impact had happened on children, on gender relations, and on issues that were not researched before. But on the other hand, if we're looking into social protection at large and redistribution of expenditure, we might not need impact evaluation. We might need another sort of study that would compare what are the best benefits, because it's studying the phenomenon that would be and that did not happen. So I think we need both. Thank you very much for the presentation that took place. I really enjoyed it, and looking forward to listen to my colleagues. Thank you.
Great. Thank you very much, Your Excellency, for those inputs, both some questions for Rima and identifying some areas for priority, both for research of different forms, impact evaluation and others. So Jeremy Hopkins, I'll turn next to you. We'd love to hear what you think are some of the key knowledge priorities that partners, including government, but also including international organizations and academic research centers, should be focusing on in the years ahead, and what role UNICEF can play.
Thank you very much. And thanks to Dr. Rima for an excellent presentation, very thought-provoking. And I wasn't absolutely not privy to what the substance was going to be, but I found it very, very relevant for our discussion today. So well chosen in terms of the examples you gave us. Maybe I'll start with building from Dr. Naveen's point about social protection. I think this is it continues to be an enormous priority for the country. There's been enormous progress. There's some very good practices, Takaful and Karama being one of them. And I would fully support what the minister just said, that there is a need to do further research. Impact evaluation, yes, always useful, but I think I'd like to see some research about or analysis or something that looks into the ability of the system to respond to shocks. Because we have the example of a shock we've just been through. I don't think Takaful and Karama was flexible enough to be able to respond. They certainly increased the number of poor families which are on the program, which is excellent. But ideally, we'd have a social protection system that brings in people during the period of shock and then lets them go again afterwards in the big millions. Dr. Naveen mentioned there's 9 million people, 9 million households on the registry, 3.9 million on the program. So what sort of learning can we do to see how we can bring on and off the program according to the shock that is in question? And it could be one similar to the one we've just been through. We know there's going to be more in future. Something around that. And I do agree, Dr. Naveen, that now is a very critical moment with the subsidy reform process and the possible opening up of fiscal space. Where do we invest that money? How do we build a case for putting it into something like Takaful and Karama, conditional cash transfers? I think it's an exciting research area. So that would be one. A second one, I think, is around, again, maybe it's about learning from best practice, perhaps, but looking into how we can use whatever tools we have to engage and consult with adolescents and young people. We know they're a big priority for the country. We know we're on the verge of another demographic dividend, as we like to call it, but a large youth population. How can we engage them somehow in policy making, not as policy experts, but how can we ensure we build their opinion in? I know Dr. Naveen is a fan of Rapid Pro, which is a technology used to sort of get quantitative data from people who are in the program. And I don't know what the reach is in Egypt, but Ministry of Social Solidarity is using Rapid Pro, Ministry of Health is using Rapid Pro. It's a sort of consultation mechanism. That might be something, but there may be other things that we can learn and some research we can do to see how we can use the opinions and the voices of young people. I'm thinking about climate change in particular. We know that the Middle East and North Africa has the lowest interest on climate change from young people. That's according to global research. So how can we use a possibility of dialogue to also mobilize young people, and what can we learn from other countries? So I don't know what you call that. The research experts will help there, but that would be another area. A third area I'd like to think we would all agree on is digitalization. Egypt is moving forward fast and very impressively on that front. Our concern, of course, is the digital divide. How do we ensure that we're not leaving the poorest behind, which is, of course, counter to most of our mandates here in the room. Something again about looking at best practice. Perhaps there is best practice. I mean, Egypt is actually ahead of the game in many ways, but we need to do some learning there. And a final area would be around in the education sector. There's been an enormous learning loss globally this year. That's in pretty much every country in the world. And no reason why it wouldn't be impacting in Egypt. We can't currently measure that learning loss, but it is going to have an impact unless we address it. So I think we need to look and see, firstly, I think that there's work ongoing now on how to measure the loss of the last year and a half, and we hope it won't be repeated in the near future. But what are we going to do to address it? There, I think, again, we can look at best practice around the world and see what we can bring in. And the minister, you mentioned Haya Karima. I think that you're right, that also does offer a good focus for some of our research, especially quantitative research, as we move forward. We're at the outset of the program, so we can see perhaps how we can use Haya Karima as a focus, not necessarily for all of the priorities we agree on, but definitely we should look into that. Thank you.
Great, Jeremy, thank you. And next we'll turn to Samara Talla, over to you. From your perspective as a researcher who works on policy issues in Egypt, can you share with us what you think some of the development priorities are that would benefit the most from either drawing on existing global lessons if they exist, or launching new research in order to help inform priorities moving ahead?
Thank you, Alison. I have 3 pages of notes, so I'll try to be brief. Two main headlines from the conversations and the remarks that we have heard. I think the one big headline is the potential, and the other big headline is partnership. I remember the first presentation I spoke from. Some evidence here. So I remember the first presentation when I was introduced to JPAL in my new capacity is this nice map where they have the 7 regional offices, and they show the number of randomized controlled trials and how in the MENA region the number of randomized controlled trials is still small compared to the other offices. And I think this is really an indication of the potential. I want to quote what Rima said. We do have a lot to learn from the rest of the global research that is done, but we do also have a lot to offer in terms of the Egyptian context and the challenges it faces. If I were to, if I were to put some key areas where I think there is a lot of work to be done and has to be put on the government agenda, and it has to do a lot with the global challenges that Egypt are part of. One of them is obviously climate change, and it has to do with the particularity of water scarcity and water usage and water management in Egypt. I think this is, and I really like that Jeremy flagged this. This has to be, I don't know if, I know that JPAL works on some of these areas, but I think this is an area where we absolutely need to advance the agenda and develop some areas of research that are interesting, particularly to water management, which is a major challenge that the country is facing. The other area where I think is of important is, and I'm glad that I don't want to break some news, but I'm glad that we're working on this year, is the employment market in Egypt. And I think that the very fast digitization, the changing nature of work has put a lot of strain and stress in the nature, the operation, the structure of the labor market in Egypt. Particularly, one thing that I'm deeply concerned about is the participation of female workers in the labor market. So I think digitization might offer a great potential to change the nature of work for women working in Egypt. So that's, I think, another also, and it also really tackle a big umbrella of divide within the Egyptian society, whether it's a digital divide, whether it's a wealth divide, whether it's an educational divide, that absolutely need to be addressed. I want to underline really the multiple methodologies that we can adopt. So we have randomized controlled trials. We have now, with the government putting as a priority the digitization of its services, we have a wealth of data that can be used as a combined methodology along with RCTs that can help us as researchers. If you ask me as an economist, what is the thing that I love and adore and hope to have more of it, is data. It's just the basic principle tool that we operate with. So I really encourage that we expand the access to this data. They are very, 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 very useful for us as researchers. The other big headline that I want to address is, and I'm stealing that from one of Rima's slides, is the partnership. I don't think anything can be done without this strong, sustainable, continuing and growing partnership between us as researchers and the government and the policymakers. We want to learn from you, and we think we can help you scale up all of these policies up to a larger scale. I really love the number that is also in this deck of slides of the JPAL team, is the 500 million plus people that were able to be have better lives and improved and coming out of poverty because of the scaling up of these RCTs. So I want to emphasize partnership, usage of data. They're quite useful for us to set the agenda for the future. Thank you, Alison.
Great, thank you, Samer. So I think at this point, we've now heard from the ministry, from UNICEF, from AUC around sort of zooming out a bit and thinking about what the big priorities are, where we need either evidence generated in Egypt or we want to learn from what we already know worldwide. So I know that we have, I was handed our sign-in sheet earlier. We have a really excellent group of people who are assembled here. Many of you are from a variety of different government agencies working on health, working on planning, working on, let me see, international cooperation, a variety of different topics. So we'd really love to hear from those of you who are here representing government with, what are your views on the places where we really want to learn from the global evidence or where we should be doing new research. And so I think we can start with a round of inputs from those audience members. And then I know we're also really privileged to have great representation from UN agencies, World Bank, Population Council, from Cairo University. So I think in a second round, we'd love to hear from those of you who are representing kind of international organizations and academia. Please keep your remarks brief since we're in our last half hour. We'll gather as many ideas as we can, and this will help to shape the direction that UNICEF and JPAL MENA go in our future work. And I think will also help to inform the different ways that we can all work together per the theme of partnerships from Samer. So if you're interested in sharing kind of the views from your organization, please do raise your hand and the microphone will come to you.
Thank you, Alison. Riham Riz, the head of the Modeling and Forecasting Unit at the Ministry of Planning and Economic Development. Thanks for inviting me to this prestigious session with such a distinguished attendees. Actually, what I want to talk first is the key priorities of the government. I just want to complement and support what Her Excellency Dr. Naveen Qabash has just mentioned about the national projects that has been undertaken, and including, for example, the Decent Life Initiative. The Decent Life Initiative, it aims to improve the quality of life in the poorest villages. It has several pillars. It works on it, the access to basic services, improving livelihood support, investing human capital through revisiting or the existing school buildings and clinics and building new ones, and actually finally the job creation and youth inclusivity. Each of those pillars, the resources that allocated for it, it's just a huge. The budget for the Decent Life Initiative is 700 billion Egyptian pound over 3 years. This is on the top of the agenda of the government now. Also, what I just want to mention as well, the Family Planning and Development Initiative. It's a targeted initiative to women aged 18 to 45. And this actually has 4 main pillars. It's economic empowerment for women, provision of a bunch of training programs in order to improve her qualification to be engaged in the labor force, and to solve the problem that Dr. Saimer have just mentioned of the low female labor force participation rate in Egypt. Actually, also the usage of the contraceptive methods and ensure its accessibility for free. It's not only, but also the program has a pillar of constructing medical teams that offer visits to families for free in order to orient them on the importance of small family, and keep using these methods. And also the beneficiaries, they're gonna benefit from a bunch of interventions, cash transfers, in-kind transfers as well. There is a huge awareness campaign that will take place not only for the beneficiaries themselves, which are the women in the program, but also awareness campaigns will take place at the schools for girls and boys, at colleges. Seminars will be conducted at village level. Finally, they will revisit the laws and procedures that prohibit completely the early marriages problem in Egypt. All of those actually national programs has a lot of strategic partners. Along with the Ministry of Planning and Economic Development, we do have the Ministry of Social Solidarity, Ministry of Trade, Mass Media, Ministry of Information, in order to have all of this happen correctly and embed this impact evaluation culture in the process and the policy making process, I think one of the things is the interaction between the needs and the policies, between the needs and the problems of the government and the corresponding interventions that we need to do. So this is really very important to employ these national needs in designing the programs, to identify what works, what doesn't work, and how effective various alternatives are really very important in achieving policy goals. I think ranking those programs, always the government, always the policy makers, they want they want to know if those programs, or investing in those programs, would generate enough benefits to justify their costs or not. So I think ranking those impact evaluation will help them to rank those programs by their potential returns on investment, providing them with information on which alternatives can achieve the greatest return. I think one of the main challenges as well that we are facing is lack of expertise who's working in impact evaluation in Egypt, plus the multiple government agencies that they are policy or they are oriented and open to change. But I think I don't know. I just want to actually launch something that we have already working with JPAL and AEC on, with launching the Egypt Impact Lab, which take into consideration those challenges and those programs to work on. So we do have the Egypt Impact Lab, which is, it's not only the Ministry of Planning is working on, but with also our strategic partners. One of the key strategic partner in this lab is the Ministry of Social Solidarity. So along with MENA, along with Ministry of Industry, National Council for Women, we do have like a bunch of UN agencies that work with us in order to have this rigorous and series of impact evaluation took place and embedded in the process of the policy making. Thank you very much. Sorry for being long.
Thank you. We'll open to another few questions and maybe a little bit of summing up here from our government colleagues first. Yes.
I'm not from a ministry, but I have to go because time management has been a problem here. So my comment really is about how in this panel, the word evidence has been translated as data. And very limited data, apolitical data. Data taken out of context. So if we say that 540 million people, their lives have been improved, we know this statistically, but how else do we know it? And so my first question is, does JPAL verify its own findings? That is, once an RCT has been terminated and data has been produced, how do we know how robust this data is and how relevant is it over a longer cycle? And I think this is something that's very important for a policymaker to know, because then you can decide the cost of this data. Is it worth investing in? My second comment is also about the responsibility that we have as researchers to be biased towards freedom of research. The problem with RCTs is that they are very non-threatening data collection initiatives. They have very, specific indicators that they're measuring and a specific definition of these indicators. So this is my second point, is to enhance the relationship between limited statistical applied data and other forms of data. And my last point, so as not to take more time, is to think about RCTs as not an end in themselves, but as a process. And if this process, they're just a tool. And if this tool leads to a technocratic notion of development, then we need to rethink how relevant RCTs are to these findings. And I think these 3 points are important for Her Excellency and for social protection in Egypt in general to think about before we privilege a certain methodology over broader methodologies for development. Thank you.
Great, thank you. I think there is a lot to respond there. Let's continue with a couple of comments again with the request that representing a government agency. We would love to hear from you first, and then we'll open up to others. And if you could please introduce yourself and the institution that you're representing before you raise your questions, and then we'll see what we can do with the time to try to address as many of these ideas that have come up as possible.
Okay. Excuse me, I will speak in Arabic. أحمد جمال، جهاز المركزي للتعبئة العامة والإحصاء. في البداية بشكركم على دعوتكم للجهاز اللي هي بتؤكد الرغبة الحثيثة إن إحنا عايزين نعمل تنمية استنادا على البيانات اللي إحنا تقريبا كلنا هنا أجمعنا limited statistics جابوا في data. جهاز منذ إنشاء أكتر من 100 سنة وإحنا بنحاول نطلع إحصائيات وبيانات بتعكس الواقع المصري قدر المستطاع بالتعاون مع كل شركاء العمل. يعني في البداية قبل ما بنبدأ شغل بنشوف مستخدمي البيانات احنا محتاجين ايه، الوزارات حضراتكم محتاجين ايه من البيانات اللي تقدر ترصد بيها المجتمع بتاعنا. هنتكلم في المشكلة الأساسية اللي بيواجه منها المجتمع بتاعنا، الفقر ومشاكل عدم المساواة. حاليا الجهاز بيجري الدورة رقم 15 لبحث الدخل والإنفاق والاستهلاك لعام 2021-2022 بالتعاون مع شركاء العمل الإحصائي، والأول مرة بنحاول نجريه باستخدام التابلت. كلنا حاسين بأزمة كورونا. مشكلة كورونا اللي هي بتواجه عملية جمع البيان من إجراءات احترازية وخوف الناس من التعامل مع المبحوثين والمشاكل اللي بتقابلنا في العمل الميداني. في نفس الوقت بنقوم بإجراء بحث صحة الأسر المصرية اللي هي النسخة الجديدة من DHS اللي تقريبا ما أجرناهوش من عام 2014. كل ده كان بسبب أزمة كورونا، كان من المشاكل اللي قابلنا في الميدان. النتائج من استخدام بياناتنا كلها مع بعض بنحاول ننتج خريطة الفقر اللي هي بتحدد مستوى المعيشة على أصغر وحدة إقليمية اللي هي على مستوى القرية أو الشيخ على مستوى مناطق الجمهورية. وحاليا جاري العمل على إنتاج آخر خريطة باستخدام بيانات البحث اللي تم إجراءها في 2019 باستخدام بيانات التعداد. وكمان في نفس الوقت بنعد لإجراء دراسة لرصد الوضع التنموي للقرى اللي تم استهدافها في مبادرة حياة كريمة. احنا أجرينا بحث اسمه خصائص المجتمع المحلي في عام 2015 وأجرينا الدورة الثانية في عام 2020 اللي على أساسها باستخدام بيانات خريطة الفقر تم تحديد القرى الأكثر احتياجاً للتدخلات الحكومية اللي احنا بدأنا بيه بالاستفادة من التجارب السابقة. تم استهداف مراكز كاملة، كان المركز كاملا بكل قراه مش القرى بس اللي هي فيها نسب الفقر قليلة لضمان التغطية لجميع السكان المتجولين في نفس المنطقة. هنعمل إن شاء الله دراسة تانية عشان نشوف الوضع كان في 2020 كان إيه وبعد التدخلات الحكومية شكله إيه. كلنا عندنا زي ما حضراتكم قلنا في عندنا مشاكل في البيانات، بس في عندنا حاليا اتجاه لاستخدام البيج داتا. ان احنا نستخدم بياناتنا اللي موجوده، احنا ما شاء الله عندنا كنز من البيانات. نستخدم البيج داتا للتعامل مع البيانات اللي تحتاج المؤشرات دي. كمان في مشاكل في التعامل مع الميدان، ممكن بالتعاون مع شركاء العمل الاحصائي بندعو حضراتكم نبدا نشتغل على شورت تيرم سيرفي، الدراسات القصيره اللي احنا ممكن من خلالها بدل ما انا بنزل بحث داخل وانفاق او بحث صحه الاسر المصريه بنزل بمجموعه اسئله كبيره، بنستخدم الشورت تيرم سيرفي بالاضافه الى البروكسي تيست مين. البروكسي مين تيست اللي هي التجربه اللي اثبتت نجاحها، ده نموذج حي للتعاون بين الجهات الحكوميه ما بين جهاز المجالس التعبئه العامه والاحصاء ووزاره التضامن الاجتماعي، اللي تم استخدام فيه بيانات بحث الدخل والانفاق لعام 2015 لتحديد الاسر الاكثر رعايه باستخدام نموذج بالتعاون مع اليونيسيف وشركاء العمل الاحصائي. اللي احنا استفدنا منه من الدوره اللي بعدها ان الفقر في اقليم الصعيد اقل ما يزيد عن 11 نقطه. وفي النهايه بنشكر حضراتكم، شكرا جزيلا.
Maha Hilary from the National Council for Persons with Disability. On the board, I represent persons with intellectual disabilities, parents. I would like us to add a point, which is inclusion in schools. This is supposed to be a priority on the development agenda, and it needs to be studied and the impact and how much implementation has been done. There has been criteria for acceptance set by the Ministry of Education, and also there are accommodations given for the exams, but we want to know more about what provisions are given to the children once they are accepted during their learning, not only when they are accepted and not only at in the exams. Also, the agenda mentions that the inclusion will increase, and also that the special schools will develop, their curriculum will be developed further. This also needs to be looked into. And the big question is about children who do not meet the criteria and are out of the school system. What happens to them? Thank you.
Hibba Nassar, Cairo University.
it's about evidence-based research, and I'm happy to be after the response. I mean the CAPMAS too, because I'm a heavy user of CAPMAS data. If you talk about evidence-based, then we are talking about data. Then the CAPMAS has a lot of data, yes, and we are trying to use this. The problem is that it's very good to have research with the researchers working with the CAPMAS along to have a timely use of data. The problem is when we use the data, it will be coming to us after 2 years or even 3 years. So it's not a timely use of data. So it's very nice to have work together with research centers in addition to the donors and us tackling a problem. And this has been done once when we studied the poverty dynamics in Egypt, Ministry of Planning, researchers, Ministry of Planning, and the CAPMAS. And then, so, because if you talk about evidence-based research, then you are talking about the production of data, and now the CAPMAS is very heavy in production of data, but the dissemination and the use of data in, after it has come out, not after 1 or 2 years. Then we can talk about evidence-based research, and using all the technology that has been mentioned, like Hanya mentioned, it's not only data. We can also have some quantitative analysis for the data. And here we want to have a research center or researchers with us because our data is telling me that it's coming out, coming down, but I don't know why. Or I have to tackle it with other methodologies. To get at the end, a kind of a research and impact analysis of the project, or which the policymaker won't choose. What the policymaker wants is a policy paper at the end. So this is another, I think, another step that has to be mentioned and tackled, that the language of research is different from the language of the policy paper. And this is something also in addition, this can be also done by a research center. So what I want to say is that the production of data and use of data and analysis, they have to go together all over. When I tackle any problem or any issue, to come out with a policy paper suggesting alternatives at the end and cost benefit for the alternatives, and the policymaker will tackle it. The last issue is why don't you discuss also the observatoire? This is very important for research center to have or to work also with the CAPMAS or with any other agency to have an observatoire for a certain problem, Haya Karima, or for a certain issue. Any project or any idea that is implemented, any idea that is implemented now, it's not even an idea, it's a very big project now that are implemented, like Haya Karima and like Takaful and Karama and all the other. I don't want to be longer than that. Thank you.
Let's maybe take 2 more comments from the audience, and then I want to give an opportunity for the minister and Rima to offer any closing observations, and then I will do my best to try to synthesize some of these various inputs that have come in from all of these comments and questions. Yes.
أنا عبد الحميد كمال، برلماني، عضو مجلس النواب السابق ومن المهتمين من هذه البرامج. أنا في الحقيقة عايز أركز على موضوع مهم جدا. التحدي الحقيقي من كل اللي اتقال هو يأتي من البيانات وتحليلها، سواء البيانات الإلكترونية أو الرسمية أو البيانات الخاصة بالواقع الميداني. الجزء الثاني اللي هيترتب على البيانات ده هيترتب عليه حاجتين: تحسين الخدمة، وأقدر أقيس الأثر حول ما يحدث. صحيح السياسات العامة فيها نقلة وشيء جيد وكده، لكن التحسين يأتي من مهمة تشريعية خطيرة جدا. الدستور تحدث عن المادة 68 الخاص بإتاحة المعلومات والبيانات باعتبارها ملك للشعب، وحتى الآن لم يصدر قانون رغم في مطالبات كتيرة أنا واحد منهم، لكن حتى الآن القانون الخاص لم يصدر القانون الخاص بإتاحة المعلومات والبيانات، ومن ثم أي بيانات أو أرقام هي في الحقيقة بتبقى محل مهم جدا، هو تحدي عشان نحسن التوجه العام نحو الدعم للفئات التي تحتاج إلى دعم في المجتمع. شكرا.
Excellent, thank you. And I realize that I have not yet officially opened up the comments from those who are representing the various international organizations who are here. So please, if you'd like to chime in as well. I request that you do keep your interventions quite short because we do only have a couple more minutes with the Minister and Rima.
Just a few minutes. My name is Assam Al-Adawi. I'm from Save the Children International. I think the main challenge is not the lack of expertise or the lack of the people that they are doing the research or the tools that they are doing the research. But I think the main challenge is the enabling environment to do the research. This is one important point, that if we do have an environment that enable us to reach the information smoothly, analyze it and put it, I think the situation will be a bit different. Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Asma Azzat. I'm Associate Professor of Economics in Faculty of Economics and Political Science, Cairo University. And also I'm wearing another hat. I'm head of Governance Center in the National Institute of Governance and Sustainable Development. So, but I will talk mainly here, in addition to all the comments from the esteemed audience. Also, I would like to stress the importance that one of the main challenges faced here, that we are looking only for the formal perspective, how we can inform government to take evidence-based decisions, but actually ignoring the informal institution that could affect the decision taken by the government. When we take undertake any research, it's very important to take into account the culture and norms that could affect the results of government policies. That's why some of the government policies would not achieve its main results, because we have to take into account, while conducting such evidence-based research, the informal institutions like the culture, the norms, and the ones that really affect, and how decisions should be in conformity with such informal institution in the country. So again, I stress the importance of data, but not only on the formal perspective or formal side of the economy, but also the informal, not only informal sector, but only informal institution to be taken into account while taking such evidence-based policy decision. Thank you so much.
Hello, my name is Nahla Abdeltawab, Country Director, Population Council. What has been said is music to my ears, even the topic, which is the evidence-informed development, because as a research institution, I can always see that and feel to what extent research is not seen as a priority. So dialogues and meetings like this one are of utmost importance. A lot of times, programmers and policymakers do not see research as a priority. They do not see evaluation as a priority. Research is seen as expensive. A randomized control trial a lot of times takes about $1 million to implement. Programmers would say, let's use this money to implement activities rather than do research. So this perception that research is expensive, research is a luxury, this is one thing that we need to change. And I think we as researchers take some of the responsibility. Also, research takes a lot of time, as Dr. Heba Nassar mentioned. Again, we as researchers need to come up with more rapid evaluation procedures to be able to answer questions, because policymakers cannot wait for 2 years for our results to come out. Finally, as I said, we need this dialogue to continue, because a lot of times impact evaluation is done at the end of a program, after all the activities have been implemented. Again, we need more dialogue so that researchers would understand priorities of policymakers, and also policymakers need to understand what an impact evaluation entails, and that impact evaluation needs to start with the design of the program, not at the end of the program. Thank you.
Good afternoon. Hi, this is Amira Mahmoud, representing Ministry of International Cooperation, which is the ministry mandated to oversee the partnership with the UN in Egypt. We target strengthening Egypt's inclusive multilateral engagement, and to achieve this goal and coordinate international assistance towards implementing the National Development Agenda. We always seek to rely on data and evidence-based research. This is usually done through focusing on assessments, midterm evaluations, and evaluations that shape our vision moving forward, in addition to consultations with national counterparts, government agencies, as well as UN agencies. As part of the effort to develop the next 5-year plan, we have also built in strategic foresight exercises with the UN in consultation with national counterparts, such as Ministry of Planning. These are designed to inform continuously and the update of the strategy, as well as also to ensure that we're building in resilience considerations in fulfilling the national agenda in line with the Sustainable Development Goals. So the government priorities have largely revolved on investing in human capital, social protection, as Her Excellency pointed out, looking at how social safety nets, school feeding program, the national school feeding programs, and for example, the Haya Karima National Initiative are contributing to the improvement of the decent lives of Egyptians, and using international resources to fund these initiatives and also to inform them as we go on the way. We look forward to seeing more of evidence-based research in the new country programs of UN agencies, as well as the strategic framework that we're about to see come to fruition towards later this year. As Ministry of International Cooperation, we're interested to pooling resources towards such initiatives that feed into the national priorities and the development agenda. Thank you.
My name is Omar. I'm from UNDP. I just wanted to highlight something from the discussion, is the importance of the inclusion of the private sector in such a role. Jeremy, you spoke about digitization and climate change. There were talks about including of gender or gender disparity in the workforce. So how research is gathered and how evidence is gathered and the implementation of such policies, the private sector has a big role to play in something like this, seeing how maybe historical data this has been supported, or how it improved policies, or how evidence and research can actually support how these policies can take forward a step further. Just this in consideration. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Okay, now I think we have time for 2 final points from the audience. I see a hand here and a hand over here. And then we'll give each of our 4 presenters and panelists just 1 minute to offer any concluding points, and then I'll wrap us up. For those of you who are here and who have more to say, we're happy to stay back and to talk much more together. There's so many great ideas here. But yes.
Thank you. Praveen Agrawal from the World Food Program. Thank you, first of all, for this great meeting. I think it really is opening the discussion on what are the priorities and why do we want to do what we want to do. I think one element when we're collecting data is not to lose sight of the interdependence of data. It's not we're going to do things in a silo. So we build a whole bunch of stuff for one thing, and then we reinvent the wheel when we do something else. So I would like to stress, as with the UN organizations, we're looking at the interdependence and the coherence of the data that's being collected so that it can serve multiple purposes and address and build the linkages that are required, because I think it was over there talking about the human capital development when we're talking about Haya Karima. And yes, in order to build human capital development, you will need to build that interdependence and that coherence at that social level. So I would also like to see, as we look at data and the use of data, I think there was various mention about how data is used. Data, we need to see where are we using it. Are we using it at the macro level? Are we using it at the micro level? At what level are we collecting this data for, and what is the exact purpose? Because I think we need to link it, especially in social protection, to what are the services being provided, and what is that quality of service that is being provided. And I think I've heard the term cost several times. If we're looking at human capital development, then we're looking at an investment, and that's not short term, that's long term. Yeah, so we really need to see if we're going to reach and leave no one behind, then what is the level of consistent and constant investment that needs to be made, and which are the sections. Lastly, I think a lot has been talked about, and Egypt is very rich in that. It has a lot of data, it has a lot of, but we need to make it faster and more agile so that more people can look at it and work with it. There was one element here that I'd written and I've now lost it. Yes, digitalization. This is definitely the direction to go. And I think, and I share Jeremy's concern on that, and the desire to push on that and innovation. But we need to keep focus as to who else is involved in digitalization. Is the Ministry of Planning fully engaged? Is this being budgeted for by the Ministry of Finance? Is the Ministry of Telecommunication and whoever are the other entities that will be required to take that digital pipeline down to the people? Because that it needs to have a user at the end of the day. And I think education is a very good one. At the end of the day, we're talking about adolescence and the tomorrow of Egypt, right? So we need to make sure that those people, those children, have access to that knowledge. So it's a holistic approach, and that's what I would like to just bring to the table.
Okay. I think we had one final comment, and then I'll hand it over first to the minister and then to Rima for closing remarks.
Hi, everyone. Maya Zinedine, Ministry of Health and Population. I'll try to make it short. I'm speaking about, I think this dialogue is very beneficial for all of us. Thank you for all the comments. I'll take it from here. Speaking about the health perspective, we have to do more research, evidence-based research on the health and social behavior. We're doing a lot of great work through the government programs and many interventions, but we still need to do more interventions or get a recommendation related to unchanged social and health behavior, especially in the nutrition and the food aspects. We do have challenges related to how after this research, what as a policymaker should I do? What interventions or changes should be done to these programs? Should it continue, and the economic impact, and what to do related to the know-how, what I need to change in that to gain impact on the social and the health behavior. For example, we're not moving people from all the places to another new places without it changing the health and social behavior and all the bad behaviors that people is still doing. Another thing is, I think the sites of decent life, Haya Karima, in the rich environment to start doing these researches and see how these program, the government program, make gains and impact on the real ground. I think this will connect all the partners together, and not we have to work all together as a team, especially in this side. Thank you so much.
Perfect. Thank you very much. So Minister Naveen Khabaj, we'll turn it over to you for any closing remarks that you'd like to offer, having heard all of these rich ideas and questions from others in the audience.
Thank you very much for this insightful presentation and participation from dear colleagues throughout the different ministers and the experts. And I really appreciate holding this important session. I think it's very vital at this moment to do this. My suggestion is to take it forward and to register down all the notes that we've already taken and to hold another technical session that would be interesting to share, because I think it's a duty and it's an ultimate aim during the coming period to have this done, especially with not only Hayat Karima, but Hayat Karima, social protection scheme, policy issues that are extremely vital at this stage. So we need the expertise, we need the research based, and we need to build a mechanism in order to keep things going with real time. I know that it's not easy to have the data updated regularly, but nonetheless, we can have different mechanisms. So my suggestion is to have UNICEF holding this together, because they're also working with us on social protection. And I know that JPAL and our team of experts, Dr. Hania, Dr. Hiba, all the distinguished guests, and Mrs. Maha Halili, I think that all of us are partners in the same boat. So if we can have another session in order to reflect on what we discussed during this session, whether on cash transfer or disability or the other sectors, and then we can hold another meeting. We can even hold it in Mosque if you're interested. We are interested to continue this, and we can share with you our statistic strategy and data issues, and we can take it from there. I think just to have things pushed forward in terms of utilization of what we discussed and building on to have something concrete that we can continue the process with. It is important, and all of the surrounding guests and experts are the ones who do it in the country. So we need it. Thank you very much, and it was a real pleasure to be with you. I would have liked to be there, but due to health conditions, I'm away. Thank you very much.
Great. Very much. And Rima, now we'll turn it to you for any closing remarks on any of the big ideas raised.
Well, thank you so much. I think, this is such a great discussion, and I wish we had time to really address a lot of the issues raised, which I think are very relevant and really are very worthy of dialogue. I think I'm going to end on one note, though, that I do think, at the end of the day, I agree. One of the, with many of the speakers, a lot of the topics of the discussion today came up where we should do impact evaluation and when we should do it. And I think, this for me is where these partnerships are very important, because at the end of the day, we want to do impact evaluations where we think they could be powerful, where there's something new that we don't know the answer to, where we really want to learn. And in order to set the right questions and to think about the different alternatives we want to try, where we want to pilot different types of techniques and policies and programs to understand what can work best, I think the only way to really do that and for it to be policy relevant is to set the questions together, coming together with government and researchers and civil society and even the private sector, as what was mentioned in some of the discussion, to come together and say, what do we need to learn? Where can impact evaluation be useful, and how we can work together to move forward to improve this evidence base. So thank you.
Great. Rima, thank you very much. Jeremy, we'll turn it over to you, and then Samer.
Sure. Thank you very much. And as my first opportunity to engage physically, I've really enjoyed today. I won't really attempt to make too many deep and meaningful closing remarks. I think that the substance is there clearly. I wanted to sort of recognize that the ongoing work with CAPMAS and with others is enormous. I mean, there is an enormous amount of work going on, including some which touches on the issues that have been raised today. So plenty of good work there. I really liked, was it Heba who said, a policy maker needs a policy paper. I don't know if it was supposed to rhyme, but I like that. And that we've got to keep that in mind. There's no point, obviously, in doing research for its own sake. And I think that was seconded by the colleague from Ministry of Health. And also I think an important point, Praveen, was the interdependency of data. Let's make it as useful as possible because it is expensive. You have to make it stretch as far as it can. And that comes out of these sorts of discussions. So thank you very much. That's all from me.
Thank you, Jeremy. Thank you, Alison. I'll try to be brief because I'm mindful of the time. I mean, this was a very engaging conversation with a lot of widespread views and points. Again, I want to underline really the importance of data, the importance of the enabling environment for research. They are critical for us and for this partnership for research, this partnership between us as academic and government, the availability, the production, the dissemination of data, and over and above the enabling environment. I cannot stress this as important for us to help and guide and improve policy. I'm really appreciative of the comments of my colleagues from the government. I think I've seen a snapshot of a very long list of priorities. I think this is very important for us to continue think together, improve this partnership better for a better policy informed environment and a better academic work for us also. So thank you so much.
Great, thank you. And so technically my job is to recap what was discussed, but as you saw, many of our JPAL colleagues were taking notes on the great things that you said. I received like pages of recap from the excellent JPAL team. So I cannot do justice to all of your wonderful contributions in about a minute. So I'll try to pull out just a few big themes and then we can wrap and go have coffee and snacks. So I think the first is this question that Rima mentioned, which is, the reason that we want to have these kinds of dialogues is JPAL doesn't set the agenda. UNICEF doesn't set necessarily the research agenda. We want to hear from you all about where will research actually be useful. The point of research is for it to have useful impact on policy decisions. And so we really appreciate your sharing what those big questions are. One of the, I think, things that has emerged from a lot of the comments is let's think about the really big programmatic opportunities where evidence could really be transformative. Haya Karima came up so many times today. We've spoken also about the family development and family planning and some of the kind of health and behavioral programming. So we'll capture some of those big programmatic areas where we think that impact evaluation or learning from existing evidence could be really helpful. So thinking about those big programs is one. Second, data was I think one of the most commonly cited things here today, thinking about accessibility, cost, collaboration to generate data usefully and quickly so that it can inform our decision making. So I think that will remain an important part of the work that we and all researchers are doing, working on policy. And then I think finally a theme that came up in a few of these comments was around thinking about just starting to incorporate evidence use more and more into decision making. And I think that's a priority that we as JPAL MENA hear from so many partners when we sit down and meet together. And we're really excited to help support and facilitate making that happen in your organizations. So I think those are a few of the bigger themes that came up. There's so much substance in terms of what those big ideas and big programs and big questions are. We'll do something to capture all of the really rich inputs from you all. Maybe we'll put it together into a blog or something. We'll find a way to share it back with all of you. And we will absolutely, you'll see these themes come up in the future Global Evidence for Egypt seminar series that will be kicking off again very soon. But I think you'll also see these themes show up in other work that UNICEF Egypt is doing and other work that JPAL MENA is doing. So thank you very much. We hope that we can continue the conversation with each of you kind of bilaterally as well. So please do find, any of us during the coffee break. Thank you again, panelists, to Samra Tella, to Jeremy Hopkins, to Rima Hanna, and to Minister Naveen Kabag. We're very grateful for all of you to be with us today, and thanks for sticking over a little bit.